Hey, what's up, Exit the Matrix family? Bob here. Hey guys, I was getting ready to drop a video that I recorded yesterday, and thank God I checked it out because apparently my phone glitched or something in the middle of it, and I'm having to recut this video, or at least on this subject. So um, the nice thing is, though, I did that in my car on the way home from work yesterday, so hopefully this is a little better background for you to look at than the interior of my work car. Um, anyways, what I wanted to talk about is a very touchy subject, and I know it's going to ruffle some feathers, but the reason why you follow me on YouTube or Facebook or X is because Exit the Matrix is about exiting the Matrix, folks. And this subject is going to be touchy because it's a subject that has been beaten into the heads of those that follow religion, and most specifically Judeo Christian religion. And this is a major subject. It's the essentially the basis of Genesis and such. And it's about a character that many believe that is the creator of all. And of course, I'm here contending with a lot of those beliefs. First off, I just want you all to understand, those of you that follow me, subscribe to me, whatever, on all the platforms that do happen to follow the Judeo Christian teachings, the Bible, the Old Testament, and the New Testament, just understand I love you, folks. I love you as my brothers and sisters from Source. I mean, no ill will. And I'm honestly not even trying to change anybody's thoughts or viewpoints. I'm just, I guess, putting this question out there to get you to think and to think critically and to hopefully find your own truth. But to um, see if you're willing to think outside the box also. Because this matrix that is all around us, this matrix that controls our lives, that controls this realm, that manipulates us through many different ways, religion being one of the major ways, entertainment, media, government, all these other means also. Religion's a very powerful one. And I don't know how many of you know this, but genetic scientists have actually found a worship gene that was put into the human genome. And it was put in there on purpose because it was meant to make humans have a want to worship an entity that they thought is maybe more powerful than them, that is the reason for this world around us, and to give them something to believe in and to follow and to be manipulated and controlled by. So what is this big question? Well, it's very simple. And I would really love to hear your thoughts on this, because I asked the same question earlier today on my Facebook Exit the Matrix page. And as usual, some of you understand what I'm talking about, and others are personally attacking me because they don't have a clue what I'm talking about and they haven't done the research. And you might add, well, what research do you have that's greater than the Old and New Testament? Well, for one, I want you to understand I've been deep researching the Bible, the Old and New Testament, for most of my life since I was in my teens. However, I didn't just stop there. I also research cuneiform that spans thousands of years, from the oldest Sumerian to some of the younger cuneiform, which would be Babylonian and Assyrian. And of course, you had Akkadian, was in the middle of that after the Sumerian cuneiform, as far as in years of how old that cuneiform writing is. So just understand that too, folks, that not all the cuneiform is thousands of years old. Some of it goes back around, 800 BC or so. But also realize some of that cuneiform does go back as old as 4000 BC. That is 6,000 years from where we are now. And of course, that those original Sumerian cuneiform have some very powerful teachings and subjects that are covered. And you'll find that a lot of those same subjects are in your Old Testament. And of course, that would be the Genesis story. That would be the Garden of Eden story. That would be the creation of Adam story. Adam and Eve, I should add. And the biblical flood. You have the Tower of Babel. Yes, all of these stories, folks, are in the Sumerian and Akkadian cuneiform, and were later edited and rewritten in the Assyrian and Babylonian cuneiform. And there's also Hittite and other ancient writings that tie into a lot of this. But so I'm drawing off of that research, and also I've read the Nag Hammadi. I've studied that. I've studied a lot of the Hindu writings, such as the Bhagavad Gita, and also Zoroastrian's teachings, the Zoroastrian faith. And so I'm pulling from a wide variety of ancient sources here, including Egyptian. So what I have come to believe is that the Old Testament God, Yahweh, is not the creator of all. In fact, this is maybe a powerful entity, but an entity with creative abilities, such as we all have, but that this entity was not the creator of all, was not even the creator of this realm we call Earth, but was an entity that took over command of this realm and ruled it in the guise as the creator of all. In the ancient Sumerian, Yahweh is the god Enlil, the Sumerian god Enlil of the original Anuna pantheon. And his brother, Enki, Ea, was the serpent in the Garden of Eden. Now it's interesting to note that neither of them are even the Most High, El Elyon. In the Bible, when you come across El Elyon, Judean Christians always just write that off as being Yahweh, right? Well, El Elyon, the Most High, is Anu, the father of Enlil and Enki. And guess what, folks? They actually had a mother, Ki, that was also higher level in the Anuna pantheon than Enlil or Enki. And that's where you get the word Anunnaki from. From heaven to earth they came. Also called the princely seed, which is fitting because the Anuna were let's just say they were the royal bloodline of these Anuna, of these Anunnaki. The working class Anuna were called the Igigi or the Igigi. There's people pronounce it different ways, it doesn't matter. But they were the working class of this people. And yes, I call them people because when I say that when they were called gods in these Sumerian and in the Old Testament, they were actually just, highly technological beings, but not the creator of all, folks, not the source of all energy, light, and creation. So Now we're going to delve into this big question I'm going to ask you, and we're going to go into some details on this. And it's going to ruffle some feathers, and that's fine. That's what I like to do, because I'm going to push you to the limits of your thought process. And this is, who is responsible for more death, murder, and destruction? The serpent in the Garden of Eden, or the character known as Yahweh in the Garden of Eden, which those of us that understand that those of us that are researched understand that he is called Enlil in the Sumerian pantheon. And those of you that don't know this, that serpent was his brother, Enki, Ea. In fact, the earth is named after Ea. So, we got two brothers in the Garden of Eden, right? And of course, those of you that only study the Bible version don't know that. And I really quickly want to make this understood before we delve into who has the highest kill rate here out of the two brothers. Because I don't understand why. This is very historical, but for some reason, religious people honestly believe that the Bible was written real time. It's like they believe that there were, like, the Levite class was just, documenting history as it happened, documenting all these biblical things real time as they happen, which is absolutely ridiculous, people. Because, for one, historically speaking, by proof, the cuneiform is much older than the oldest Hebrew writings. This is proven, folks. Okay? So before you start saying that these tablets were based off of the Bible, that's absolutely ridiculous, because the Bible was not one jot was ever written down in it for thousands of years. While the cuneiform was written, the Hebrew, the oldest Paleolithic Hebrew, is pushing maybe 700 BC. Now, once again, what did I say earlier? Some of the oldest dated cuneiform tablets going back to Sumer go back as far as 4000 BC. Now, let's do the math, folks. 400 minus 4,000 minus 700. You're looking at a roughly 3,300 year difference between the two writings. So, I don't know how else to make this any clearer to people. Look, your Bible, Old Testament, was adapted off of the original cuneiform writings. It's as simple as that, folks. All the same stories are in the Sumerian, in the Akkadian and such. In the Babylonian, they were just edited and changed, just like happens to the Bible, right? New translations, new books spun off of the Bible or added to or taken out of it. This has happened even with the Bible for 2,000 years. But this happened with the cuneiform. However, those same stories are found in all of these different cuneiform writings. And of course, that alludes to the Genesis story, the creation of the world, of this realm. That goes to the creation of Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden story. Oh yes, there's a Garden of Eden story in the Sumerian cuneiform. The biblical flood, right? Noah's flood, that's in there also. And of course, it's not Noah. He goes by Ziusudra, Utnapishtim, and Atrahasis, Hasis. Those were the original names for Noah. Noah was a later name given, folks. And of course, we understand this because Noah is actually in the king's list, the Sumerian king's list, as Ziusudra. He's actually in that list as a king of Shuruppak. Now, the Bible doesn't tell you he's a king, right? No. He was just some lowly, some some man that owned some land, and he had a big family, and he was called upon by God, and he was very faithful, right? Well, in the Sumerian version, he's a king of a small holding. Not he, Sharupak was not one of the biggest cities, but it was a city state, and so, and of course, the Tower of Babel was also in the Sumerian cuneiform. And a lot of the stories that you'll find later on in the Old Testament was in the Egyptian. So let's start delving into this. Who killed more people on earth? Who was responsible for more death? The serpent in the Garden of Eden that tricked Adam and Eve to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil? Or Yahweh, who kicked Adam and Eve and the serpent out of the Garden of Eden? We're going to dig into this, folks. Okay, so according to the Bible, who brought the flood? Who brought the flood that wiped out? Who knows? We don't know. Pre-flood world was apparently a worldwide civilization, according to all the megalithic structures found all over the world, from Mesoamerica to the Far East to Africa. There's even pyramids being uncovered in parts of the Balkan areas and in parts of Europe, even, in fact. These megalithic structures are found all over the world, not just pyramids, folks, but you got step pyramids, you got Dolomite structures, you've got, of course, Stonehenge. I mean, you have these megalithic structures all over the world that date back thousands of years. So pre-flood time, in fact, in a lot of these. So let's just say we'll be gentle on Yahweh. Well, let's just say millions were millions of human deaths, man, woman, and child, and animals, were wiped out by the flood, according to God's own words, according to the Old Testament, right? That he brought the flood because man had been corrupted, the whole world had been corrupted, and that, they had all turned away from him, and they'd all been worshiping other gods and having relations with fallen angels. And I want to make one thing clear, folks. Those fallen angels that you all like to hang your hat on, those archangels also, the good ones were the archangels, the bad ones were the fallen angels, right? Well, it just so happens that all of those characters like Gabriel and Michael, they were the sons of Yahweh, according to the Sumerian tablets. Enlil had sons and daughters. And it just so happened he had a son named Ninurta and another son named Nergal. And those can be linked to Michael and Gabriel. And of course, you even see this on Enki's side of the family. You have the fallen angels, right? Lucifer, right? Well, his son that is Lucifer is called Marduk. And in the Bible, he's also called Merodach. So I can go on and on down this list, folks. All of these biblical characters. Ishtar, it was Inanna, the granddaughter of Enlil, or the granddaughter of Anu, daughter of Enlil. Oh yes, imagine that. Yahweh's daughter, Inanna Ishtar. And isn't it funny how Christians to this day worship, or they practice her holiday that goes all the way back to ancient times, because she was the goddess of fertility. Yes, you know what I'm talking about. Easter, right? We just had Easter. Oh yes, Ishtar, the goddess of fertility. Back in the ancient times, women would cover eggs in their menstrual blood, and they would leave them at her altars so that they would have good luck in bringing in new children into the world. And the Easter bunny was always represented, even in ancient times, because it was the sign of fertility. Because, quick as a rabbit, right? They pop out a lot of bunnies really, really quick. Because you have to realize, after the flood, they were trying to rebuild civilization, and they needed more humans. Because Yahweh killed all the humans, except for his one chosen family, right? Noah, Ziasudra, his family. So we already know, right, that just from pre-flood times that Yahweh's got millions of deaths on his hands. Now, the serpent, how many in the Bible exactly? We're just looking at pre-flood. How many deaths are on his hands? How many did he kill? Really? I want to know. And just so you all understand, I don't worship Enki, the serpent, okay? I don't worship any of these Anunnaki, any of these angels, any of these characters in your Old Testament or the cuneiform. However, they have a major hand in our civilization and in this realm, so it's important to study them. How many? Well, I've tried looking for references of Enki Ea or the serpent directly killing human beings or commanding their deaths, and I have not found any. Zero. So already, wow, Yahweh, man, he's kicking ass. His kill ratio in Black Ops would be amazing, right? Millions of deaths due to his command, due to his dictates. And this is actually backed up by the Sumerian cuneiform also, folks. You can, I believe it's Atrahasis, the Epic of Atrahasis, which Atrahasis is a name for Noah. You will find in that cuneiform that Enlil decided that humans had become too numerous on the earth, that they were eating up all the resources, that they were causing a great commotion on earth, that they were loud, that they were, yeah, his main reason was because he was having trouble sleeping because humans had become so loud and so numerous. And he wanted to wipe them out. He called a council of the Anunnaki, of the royal families, of the two main bloodlines, the Enkyites and the Enlilites. He called them all together, had a council, and he told them that it was time to wipe out humanity, that they had become too numerous, they were like a plague on the earth, and that they were destroying his sleeping habits. And so just so you understand, not all of the Anunnaki wanted to go along with this. And in fact, his brother, the bad guy, the serpent, the same one that had taught Adam and Eve that they were just not dumb working slaves, that they were conscious energy trapped in human avatars. And that's what infuriated Enlil. He wanted simple slave workers, according to the cuneiform. He did not want advanced thinking human beings. In fact, he was worried that human beings were possibly more powerful than the Anunnaki, which is actually alluded to in the Bible, where it says that Adam and Eve have even dominion over the archangels in a later time, of course, that they would. Well, we're getting a little deep here, folks, already, aren't we? So we're going to bring on the flood because poor old Enlil, he's having trouble sleeping, and humans are just too numerous. They've lost control of them, and they're eating up all the resources and causing a commotion. So it's time to wipe them out, right? Let's kill off all these humans. So Yahweh's actually backed up, according to the Sumerian cuneiform, for having all that blood on his hands. So now you'll find this very interesting, folks. Now, who's the one, according to the Bible version, that went to Noah and warned Noah of the great flood and told him to build the ark? Well, it was Yahweh, right? Yahweh was bringing the flood to destroy humanity and these demigods that were the offspring of the angels and humans, right? The Nephilim. And he was also the one that was going to save humanity through the bloodline of Noah. Well, according to the Sumerian versions of this, and once again reference the Atrahasis cuneiform, Enki did not want humanity to get destroyed. The serpent, I'm talking about the serpent here, his brother. He was the one that went to Noah, and he talked through his reed hut. Noah was taking a nap, Ziasudra, and he woke him up, and he talked to him through the reed hut so that he would not directly be the one to inform Noah of what was going to happen. And he understood that Noah, Ziasudra, was a king, and that he had a large amount of people under his kingship. And so he knew that he was somebody that could at least keep a remnant of humanity safe through the flood, because Ziasudra was a very respected individual in those times, just like it says Noah was. So through the reed hut, Enki, the serpent, whispered to Noah instructions on to build the ark and warned him that he had a time limit to get this structure built. Now the difference in the biblical version of the ark and the Sumerian version is that in the Bible, as you know, God told Noah to bring 2 of every animal and creature and walking thing and slithering thing and flying thing onto the ark, right? To protect, so the earth could be repopulated with those animal species after the flood, right? Well, if you actually listen to the Sumerian version, it makes a lot more sense than the biblical version, because who could get, 2 of every cricket, 2 of every type of bird, 2 elephants, 2 giraffes, 2 lions, and such onto the ark? I mean, imagine that, folks. Really, imagine that. Of course, it was magical, right? No explanation of how this actually happened. But if you read the Sumerian Atrahasis version, it makes a hell of a lot more sense, because what Enki did was he told Ziasudra to bring on animals that could feed the people on the ark. These were mostly agricultural animals, and he also told him to collect seeds and plants that could be cloned, as and these were mostly agricultural plants, because after a great catastrophe, right, what do you need? You need people that have resources that can replant and rehusband animals, to multiply the animals on the other side of the flood so that humanity could survive, right? You need to eat, right? So it makes a lot of sense, right? Build a big enough boat that you could bring on agricultural animals, that you could bring on plants that you need to replant and seeds to replant, agricultural plants. And of course, he instructed Noah to also bring his family aboard and subjects of his realm, because for one, Noah's family wasn't big enough to build this grand structure in the time given. He needed hundreds of hands working on this. Well, of course, the Bible version was just magical, right? This gigantic boat built by just Noah's family. Absolutely ridiculous, folks. The Sumerian version actually makes sense. It's not as fantastical. It's practical, right? Farm animals, agricultural plants, seeds, and not just his family, but other subjects of his realm that he asked him who would come aboard, and the ones that did, and the ones that thought he was crazy turned away from him and went back to the city, back to Shuruppak. So here we are. We're 30 minutes into this talk, folks, and I've broken down, I believe, pretty well the biblical and the Sumerian versions of this flood that was brought on by Enlil, Yahweh, that some of you may call the creator of all. So we put that to rest. Now we're going to move into after flood kill counts, right? So we got all these murders that happened, at Enlil's hands, at Yahweh's hands, pre-flood. Okay, now we move into the after flood. As you know, this Yahweh character just continued on with his conquest, right? He brought his chosen people out of Egypt, under the guidance of Moses, according to the Bible, that he was commanded to free the Hebrew slaves from the Egyptians and to make their way into the Levant, into the Holy Lands. And of course, from this was hundreds of years of war and conquest and smiting being done, and rape and pillage and murder, all under the direction of Yahweh. Of course, the serpent, once again, folks, I mean, all the rest of the Old Testament, the serpent's not murdering or killing anybody. Nope. It's once again Yahweh. The God of love, that some of you would call him. The same God that took on the Jesus Christ avatar. That's what you all say, right? That he walked the earth as a human to atone for humans' wickedness and non-worship of him. So he had to come show us the way, right? He had to be the blood sacrifice, because we know that Yahweh loves sacrifice since the beginning. Always blood sacrifice, animals and such. Even telling some of his own most hardcore followers to sacrifice their own sons just to prove their loyalty to him. Such a loving God. I'll tell you what, man. This guy wins the greatest love of all kind medal. One little side note I want to add, when it comes to this exodus out of Egypt. Do the research on this, folks. You'll actually find that Moses was the Pharaoh Akhenaten, and that his followers, the Hyksos, were these so-called Hebrews. Not slaves, no. They were his followers. They were his most loyal followers. When Akhenaten brought in the worship of the one God, of the sun god, he had a following of Egyptians that followed his beliefs, that put away the worship of the old gods. Well, folks, those old gods, those Egyptian pantheon gods, were no other than these same Anunnaki. This was all about rivalry between the Enlilites and the Enkyites. And I'll do a breakdown of this at some point, but just to kind of speed up this process, look into this yourself. Moses was Pharaoh Akhenaten, and there was a civil war that happened within Egypt. And Akhenaten grabbed the Ark of the Covenant out of the Great Pyramid. Now, the Ark of the Covenant, think about this, folks, ark, like an electrical ark, okay? Think of the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark. Remember in that when the Nazis open the Ark, how they all melt and such, it's like radioactive. It's interesting to note, even in the Old Testament, it talks about how the Levites, priests, had to wear special garments, and they had to have special gloves, and they had to carry the ark in a certain way, or else it would literally melt you. You would die instantaneously. Sounds like it was some kind of a energy device, right? Well, what do you think powered up the Great Pyramid and a lot of the other pyramids? There were these devices in them. There's this huge black sarcophagus in the king's chamber, and nobody knows what was in that. Well, I can tell you what was in that. It was the Ark of the Covenant. And I can tell you where it went. It went with Akhenaten and his entourage that fled Egypt. And that the other Egyptians that were led by the priest class of the other Egyptian gods that were furious with Akhenaten and his one god, his sun god, they went after him, especially after he stole their power device that powered up their Great Pyramid. He fled as a thief in the night with his followers, and they were, of course, chased after by the other Egyptians. And hey, on a side note, actually, there's something really interesting, right, that just happened also, right? Remember Easter? Remember that? Well, what do the Judeans worship during that time? Passover. Good Friday, right? Good Friday, guys. Let's delve into that because this adds to Yahweh's kill count. Very interesting to note all this. What is Passover? Well, remember how the Hebrews had to put a mark over their doorways, right? If I remember right, wasn't it a lamb's blood or some such as that? You know, it's always sacrificial blood, right? They had to mark their doorways so that on that night of God's wrath, all the Hebrews would be spared, but not the Egyptian children. No, those Egyptian babies were all massacred on that night. Of course, they're evil, right? I mean, yeah, they're Egyptian. They're evil, man. Come on. It ain't Yahweh's fault. They're just, you know, they're, you know, they don't follow him. They're not good people. There's no innocence that was found in Egypt. And they were worshiping the wrong gods, not him, right? Worshiping his, you know, cousins and such, and his, you know, his rivals from the other, you know, from the other Anunnaki royal families, bloodlines. So, they were all put to death, all those babies. But hey, Good Friday, right? The Hebrews were spared. Their children were spared. Egyptian children, they were sent where they needed to go, according to Yahweh. Anyways, that'll add to the count. I mean, damn, these Black Ops numbers, they're looking, whew. Man, Yahweh, man, he's on a tear. I mean, he's bringing plagues on the Egyptians. He's destroying their land. He's starving these people to death. He's bringing plagues on them. I mean, ruining their river, their main river, the Nile, you know, and he's wiping out their babies. Great fellow, this guy. Oh, and his adapt follower Akhenaten, you know, stole the Ark of the Covenant from the Egyptians too, their power device, and ferreted that away with them to the Levant. As you know, that same group of Akhenaten and his followers, who became later known as the Hebrews, they carried on a war of terror all across Mesopotamia and the Levant. Oh yes, Philistines, wipe them out. The Amalekites, wipe them out. The Amorites, the Hittites. I mean, anybody that fell in the path of Yahweh and his army. Of course, this is where Yahweh got the name Lord of Hosts, right? You understand that means armies, right? Yes, these were his armies. And he carried on this war of terror all across the Mediterranean, across the Mesopotamian area and the Levant, to establish a homeland for these Hebrews. How many hundreds of thousands were murdered in the name of this Yahweh character? Whole cities. Remember Sodom and Gomorrah? Nope, sorry. Not one good person could be found. No, not one innocent soul, man, women, and children, and animals included, could be found in these cities, right? Had to be obliterated by the furious wrath of the Lord of hosts. Now that number just kept climbing, didn't it? All through these wars. I mean, it very distinctly describes these wars. And Yahweh was a caring character. It was interesting to note that he also was known to let his followers, you know, take on slaves, take on sex slaves, concubines, you would call them. And, of course, the Muslims know this really well, that Ishmael was a son of one of these concubines. So this war carried on and on and on, and the death toll rose and continued to rise